Hey, it's Guy, you're watching Midwinter Minis, and let me tell you about the most disgusting minis I own. Nope, I'm not talking about my converted Nurgle Land Raider with teeth, eyes, and doors, and no, not the eye bearer models I made a couple of years ago either. And surprisingly, I'm not even talking about my twin toddlers who, not once, not twice, but 3 times in the last week, took their poopy nappies off in their bed and got it all over the sheets. I'm talking about these. These are the Mutant Marshes, a quirky little set of body horror terrain pieces from Wilhelm Miniatures. Absolutely disgusting, grotesque little sculptures of fingers, toes, and teeth that are guaranteed to trigger onoxophobes. So sorry if I just made you discover that you had that particular phobia. If you recognise the name, Wilhelm Miniatures is one and the same depraved creative mastermind who made the Great Clean One, arguably the most superb Warhammer conversion ever created. Anyway, just to be clear, this video isn't sponsored. I don't think you can even buy these models anymore, actually. They were part of a limited Kickstarter run and it only had 85 backers. Crazy. Anyway, I'm proud to be one of those backers, and even though you might not be able to get hold of a physical set of these right now, hopefully this will let you experience them vicariously through this video. They're really nice resin models, featuring the kind of hand-carved and sculpted detail that I absolutely love about vintage Warhammer stuff. Modern, super pristine, digitally sculpted, technically perfect models are great and all, but when you can see the tool marks, and you know various elements haven't just been copied in from a massive library of assets and shapes, it feels a bit more personal, if you know what I mean. These models also show off the strengths of resin or metal models with silicon molds, as the angles can be more intense, cuts and details deeper and weirder, where details on plastic injection molded stuff are really only intense on the top or bottom of the mold. Resin models like this can have really interesting details all over the place. That doesn't stop them from having the occasional mold line though, but no worries, the back of a knife will fix that. The undersides are also shiny resin, so I rough them up a bit with a nail file to make them not slide around in whatever tabletop game I end up using them in. This little twin finger monstrosity is the only 2-part model. The hand part sits in this little open mouth puddle of flesh. Amazing. The last step of the tiny amount of prep was to smooth out the few extra millimeters of resin at the bottom of each model, so no biggie. Now let's vacuum up all the resin dust to keep the workspace safe, you don't want to be breathing this stuff in, and then I'll stick the models to some little plastic shot glasses with blue tack ready for priming, aka the Midwinter Mini Special. Now for the paints. I am quite excited to try out some of the other new TT Combat paints. I used a few of the tester series they sent me a few months ago, but there are some really fun new colours in the range that might work really well to create some gross fleshy tones. I think, given the size of these minis, I'd also quite like to see what kind of realistic skin tones and effects I can create using my airbrush. I've somehow ended up with a couple of fun busts and larger scale minis that would be fun to paint in the future, so this would be a good opportunity to put in some practice with the old airbrush. Now, this isn't a fancy one, by the way, it cost me about 25 quid on Amazon. I'll link to that in the description. First off, I primed the models with matte black spray, and then gave them a first coat with Anubti Flesh, really just everywhere at the moment, leaving only the black in the deepest, darkest recesses. A few light coats of this stage was done in no time, and here you can see what a couple of layers built up looks like. It's pretty opaque, which is nice. Next, Rumble Skin. Similar to the last step, but leaving the darker brown skin tone visible on the undersides and in the crevices. I aimed downwards for most of these coats as well, so it'll help define the texture of the skin, catching all the wrinkles and folds from the top side and leaving them dark underneath. Again, side by side so you can see the difference. It's coming together nicely, huh? Next, Halfling Skin, a much more vibrant tone, so I thinned it a little more than the others to make it a bit more transparent, and aimed it mostly at the knuckles and fingertips. Now, the bed of your fingernail isn't much lighter than your actual skin colour, so I just altered the tone slightly by mixing in Halfling Skin with Ostrich Feather Grey and manually painted all of the nails. Now I know how beauty salon staff feel. Now these gross models have nails everywhere, and some of the fingers are teeny tiny little baby fingers, which is terrifying. Now, part of what makes body horror stuff like this so disturbing is when it looks like it could be real. So let's up the realistic look of the nails by painting on the lighter free edge of the nail, following the curve of where the nail bed would be, just by adding some ivory into the mix. Perfect. Now, Tlalacan Red. Tlilacan red, I think that's how you say it, thinned with a tiny bit of airbrush thinner just so it's a little bit transparent and will hug the recesses a bit more. And then I painted on all that raw exposed muscle, the cuts, gashes and open pits of bloody ooze. Anyone for a snack? To up the ante and the vibrancy on the red parts, I also grabbed some Viscera red and did a really fast, dirty highlight. I've used this one before and it's a really intense, lovely colour. Highly recommend. Now, some Phantom Ivory, a really nice paint that's just like Vallejo's Pale Sand, one of my all-time faves, and base coated the teeth and random spots of exposed bone. There's also a decomposing horse-ish thing in this acid pool bit. Amazing. Let's base coat its bones too. Now lots of this stuff, especially the skin tones, are quite thinly applied paint, so to give both a bit of protection and to make the next steps a bit more effective, I sprayed on some gloss varnish all over the models. Once that was dry, I then used the flesh wash paint all over everything. The skin, the teeth, the bones, the blood, the lot. Because the surface also has a gloss finish now, the wash will want to creep into the recesses even more, which is handy. Now it's not quite dry yet, but you can see what the difference the wash makes to the model on the right, rather than just the plain pre-wash version on the left. Now, mixing halfling skin with Phantom Ivory, I softly dry brush some of the more intensely detailed areas, again like the knuckles and fingertips, making sure to leave just a few areas untouched, and this will really quickly and effectively add some subtle highlights. Again, comparison shot is an improvement, right? Next up, going a bit rogue here, but I'm going to add some horrific pink. Thin down an absolute ton, about 4 parts water with 1 part paint, just to create a kind of subtle glaze that I can run through my airbrush and puff a little bit of life back into the skin in random parts. Those pinky purpley tones really help skin look more vital. It's really easy to overdo it here though, so I quit while I was ahead on every single piece. Like I said, hardly anything done, very subtle, but I reckon it's worth it. And now that's done, we can bump up the sickly grossness with a yellow wash, straight through the airbrush, no thinning, to glaze in some yellowed, manky flesh tones on random spots. I reckon these guys are going to have a tough time of it getting a toothbrush that'll wrap around all of those awkward angles, so let's add these models to the big book of British smiles.
That's enough! That's enough!
Mixing a nubsy flesh with black to create a subtle dirt colour, I then painted a thin line between the lighter free edges of the nails and the darker beds, where all the crusty gunk gets stuck. Again, the more realism we can add, the better here. I also used it to add some spots of tooth decay as well. Red wash glazed over the raw muscle and bloody bits. And then I used the tiny dregs of lots of previous paints, white, pink, skin tones and red wash, to do a few quick manual highlights on the partially decomposed human and horsey thing too. A few spots of Viscera red to sell the freshest wounds, and then I thinned down the ivory colour to make it quite transparent, and just streaked down some striations on the nails. Love it. A dash of gloss varnish on the wet bits, and I think we're done. I hope you've enjoyed seeing these models come together. A nice refreshing break from all the Warhammer 10th edition Leviathan content that's literally everywhere at the moment, right? I'm not sure what I'm going to be using these models for, but sometimes inspiration strikes and you've just got to paint the thing that takes your fancy right there and then. If you are stuck in a painting rut, I'd very much recommend you do the same. Dig into your unpainted stuff and find something that makes you happy and inspired right there and then, and get it done. That army painting project can wait a few more days, right? Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking the video and subscribing if you've enjoyed it, and I'll leave links to everything I can in the video description, whether that's the Wilhelm Miniatures awesome Instagram account, their cool Etsy store, the paints I've used, the airbrush, all that stuff. I've been Guy, you've been watching Midwinter Minis, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye for now.